A standardized language tag protocol and workflow for developing and managing multilingual ontologies, showcasing the French sickle cell disease ontology, or SCDO, and presented by me, Jade Hotchkiss. This is the poster I made for virtual presentation at the 2022 ISMB Conference. To start with, I will talk a bit about what motivated us to translate the sickle cell disease ontology into French. But first, a brief description of sickle cell disease, or SCD, for anyone who's not familiar with it. SCD is one of the most common monogenic diseases. It involves red blood cells contorting into a sickle shape. The cells then die early, leaving a shortage of healthy red blood cells, and the sickled cells can then block blood flow, causing pain, which is referred to as a sickle cell crisis. Because this can affect many parts of the body, SCD has highly variable phenotypic manifestations, including serious, if not life-threatening, conditions. All 21 Francophone African countries are affected by SCD. A French translation of the SCDO would thus promote SCDO application by French Francophone clinicians, researchers, and other relevant stakeholders, aiding SCDO-facilitated harmonization of data from Francophone research sites, and making patient-centered tracking, diagnostics, and therapeutics applications more accessible to Francophone patients. The process of translating the SCDO into French was, however, not a straightforward one. We faced some large obstacles. To preserve the original meaning of terms, it would have been ideal to use the facet translation methodology. However, although rigorous and producing consistent translations, this methodology is time-consuming and costly and was not an option for us. Then, when we wanted to annotate terms with French annotations in the Ontology AL file, we found there was no existing standardized language tag protocol for bio-ontologies. And when we explored how we would update the translations as necessary going forward, we were not able to find an existing, easily reusable workflow for developing and managing multilingual ontologies. Our approach was then to develop our own method for producing translations using manually reviewed auto-translations. We used the translation software Babylon to produce auto-translations of the labels and definitions of terms. And we then put these alongside the original English annotations in a file for our French colleagues from Tunisia to review and edit as necessary. This process involved tracking the numbers of annotations that needed editing so that we could get a rough idea of how good the Babylon auto-translations were for future reference. We also developed our own language tag protocol, which we did using the World Wide Web Consortium's IANA language subtag registry and the Internet Engineering Task Force's Best Current Practice 47. The language tag protocol that we have developed so far is made up of 4 different types of language tags. The language-only tag, which can be used to indicate when an annotation is in the primary or original language of the ontology. The translation tag, which indicates the language of a translation and which language it was translated from. For example, we use the tag FRTEN to indicate where a French annotation was translated from English. And then 2 other tags, the layperson and translated layperson tags, the latter having 2 different forms. I won't describe these here as they weren't used in the French SCDO. We developed these in advance for use in the future when we release a version of the SCDO containing layperson annotations. In this example, showing the English and French labels and definitions of an SCDO term, you can see how the 2 different types of language tags are attributed to the different annotations. We also developed our own workflow for developing and managing our multilingual ontology, which after being refined now involves an ontology translation tool, which is a graphical user interface, input template files, and standard operating procedures describing how to use the GUI. This diagram shows a screenshot of the Ontology Translation GUI's first window, which allows you to choose which type of translation you are performing, either a first translation update, or a subsequent translation update. It also shows how each time the process starts with a configuration file as input, followed by the program producing output files, which are then used to generate auto-translations in Babylon, and then curators put these in a format for translators to review the auto-translations, after which the files from the translators are again used as input for the GUI. This time, a different option is selected so that the program knows that you now want to use the files from reviewers to produce the OWL file containing translated annotations. The last part of this phase of the SCDO French translation was to make our French annotations easily accessible online. We did this by adding a button which can be clicked to display or hide the French annotations on each SCDO term's web page on the SCDO website. We believe OLS has been working on making it possible to toggle between translations within a multilingual ontology, but we could not wait for that to be available as our French colleagues have been very eager to be able to access the French annotations. The authors of this work acknowledge the Sickle Africa Data Coordinating Center, or SADC, and the Sickle in Africa Consortium and their funders for supporting this work on the SCDO.